Hi everybody, welcome back to another episode of our Dungeon Boss Face-Off series. Today we're going to be taking a look at a request that I had to compare the two demons. We're going to be looking at Malice versus Ella, and we're going to see which of those two is better based on their stats and abilities. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into it. For the case of comparison, both of these heroes, they do have the exact same rune loadout, so they are very easy to compare. They match up very well. They're both demons. Neither of them are armored or magical, so they take the same amount of damage. They both are 6-star and fully ascended. So let's get into the stats first. We'll start with Malice since we are here. Look at the base stats to begin with here. We have an attack of 1914, which in terms of base attack is pretty decent. Compare that to Ella. Ella has a base attack of 1998. So almost 2,000 base attack, which is pretty good. This is going to play a part in their normal abilities. So in terms of just basic attacking, Ella does more damage than Malice does on basic attacks. And just to point out quickly, base crit chance 45% versus Malice has base crit chance of 26% for me, but it's going to be a base of 25%, but her skill is a little bit higher because of her ascensions and her star level. But basically what that means is because of the higher crit chance, Ella's going to do more damage more often, and that's just on basic attacks though. One other thing that I do want to point out on Ella, it's one of those things that's a little bit overlooked. Most people only really think about this as far as Pigneus, the extra bonus that he gives for his crits. Technically speaking, Ella has a similar mechanic. Notice her crit multiplier, 255. We have a plus 55% that she gets. So she has her own mechanic built in that's actually better than Pigneus. So that 45 crit chance plus this extra 55% damage is pretty hardcore stuff. Is that enough to make her the best? We'll find out. Defense wise, Ella has 1575, which we've seen some defenses before, and that's actually very low. But she's not known for her tanking, so we're not really going to be looking at defense too much. Malice, on the other hand, has a very stout defense for not being armored, not being a tank. She has 1900 defense, which is very good for her hero style. Skill-wise, we already saw skill kind of with the crit. Malice has 1745 as far as skill goes. Reasonable, it's a decent middle-of-the-road stat there. Versus Ella. Ella is technically kind of a healer as well. She gets a little bit more skill as well with 1924, which is a really good base skill here. Max health pool, 5800, very low. We kind of expected that because she's a rogue. Malice has a base health of 5996, also relatively low. So either of these, because of their rune loadouts, we can rune them the same, and overall if we give them the exact same runes, Malice technically will have more health. So stats wise, if we compare and contrast these stats, it's basically a 2-2 split, like we see with a lot of comparisons. Attack and skill goes to Ella, whereas defense and health goes to Malice. We also have that crit boost that's going to go to basic attacks. That's going to go to Ella as well. So they're pretty evenly matched to start with. So what we're going to look at in terms of which of these two are better, we're going to look at their abilities and consider a full rotation if we put them on PvP defense. So let's think more long term here in terms of a full defensive breakdown here. So if we consider a full rotation on PvP defense, each of these two will use all three of their skills. So if we're able to use all three skills, which of these two is going to start shining here? So let's start with Malice. Look at her first ability, which is Theft of Grace. We're not going to look at the basic attacks. We did that already. Basically, the basic attack is 50% of their attack stat. So because Ella's is higher, hers is going to be better here anyways. Theft of Grace does 2871. It also has an option to purge buffs, which is pretty good. We're not going to be really looking at that though, but the 2871, this is exactly 1.5 times her base attack. So this one here, in terms of her first ability, scales really well with her attack. It's going to be a very high-powered ability. So 1.5 times the base attack versus Ella. Her first skill, Charm, does 1499, which is exactly 75% of her base attack. So her first ability is technically an AoE, but the direct damage that it does to the person that she targets is essentially half that of what Malice does. So 75% of her base attack, it does not scale as well. However, this particular ability, if you've ever used Ella to charm Grognog, it can be absolutely devastating. So depending on who you actually target, the strength of this skill is actually almost immeasurable, because you're taking into effect the strength of the opponents that you charm. Obviously, there's other things to consider, such as the Shade's Shroud, where you can't target certain people. But this one here is kind of misleading in terms of its total damage. But as far as numbers go, we're going to leave it at that and just assume that it does a single target damage, similar to what Malice does. In that regard, it's much less powerful than Malice. Second attack, or second ability, is actually a heal. It boosts her attack massively, and it boosts crit massively, but it doesn't do any actual damage. So what this is going to ultimately amount to is, we're not going to do the calculation for it, but if we're considering a PvP defense where we're doing all 3 turns in succession, we have to remember that this blood ritual can't be used on herself. So we can't buff her last skill. So even if she was left alone, she couldn't buff herself. So even though we have 75% attack, we can't actually use that with Ella. So this is basically just a moot point as far as this one here goes. It's damage that essentially can't be dealt. So in terms of round 2, Malice has the edge no matter how you look at it. So we're going to have to take everything into account to see how things work out. But Malice's second ability, Purging of Sins, does 2297. This comes out to be 1.2 times her base attack, so it's still better than Ella's first skill. It does more than the base attack, so it scales pretty decent. The other benefit to this one here is that it removes debuffs from allies. So both of Malice's abilities so far are very helpful in terms of stuff outside of the damage that's actually dealt. The last one, Envious Blade, does 3 attacks, 957. The 957 is actually half of her base attack. She does it 3 times for basically a total of 1.5 times her base attack, similar to her first ability. So again, we have a pretty powerful base attack, which is helpful for us. And if you look at it, it destroys buffs on the attacks as well, or at least it has a chance to do so. On the other hand, Ella's third ability. Her third ability is the Kiss of Death, which does 1499, exact same as her first ability. This 1499 is amplified if the opponent is low health. So if they're under half health, it does bump it up to 2.5 damage. But in the grand scheme of things, this base attack, without it being used properly, particularly on PvP defense, because PvP defense is going to be stupid sometimes. It's going to use this ability whether the person is low health or not. So it's going to do 0.75 times her base attack, which is pretty low. So taking all this into effect, let's look at some basic numbers here. The base attack from both of these, if we were to just consider no crits, no nothing, if both of these do all of their attacks on a 3-round PvP defense, Ella's going to be doing she's going to be doing 2 abilities and 1 attack, and Malice will be doing 3 attacks. So basically what's going to happen is Ella is going to do 2,998 damage, which is this 1499 times 2. That's what both of hers are. Plus she's going to do half of her damage is 989 of basic, because she's going to do one regular attack. So her total damage that she's going to do is going to be roughly 4,000. On the other hand, Malice is going to do all three of her abilities. She's going to deal about 8,000 damage when you combine all those three together. What this does not consider is their crit chance. So remember, where Ella really shines is she has a really high crit chance. We want to see if she crits more and she has that bonus crit damage. Does that mitigate the fact that she only has 2 damaging abilities and doesn't do quite the same potency as Malice does? If we look at Ella's abilities here, if they were to crit, basically she has a 45% crit chance. If one of these were to crit, we're going to increase her damage basically by this much here, because it's going to be, well, not quite, it's going to be more than times 2. It's going to be times 2.55. If we were to basically slightly double her damage on one of these abilities, her damage total output is going to go up to about 5,300 or so if she crits on one of her skills. That's about a 45% chance. It's about a 20% chance for her to crit on both of these abilities. If that's the case, her damage output will go up to about 7,600 to 7,700. That's including that's not including her base attack. So if we include her base attack and that crits, we're looking at around 9,000, which barely just hits past Malice's ability. Couple other things: if that last part does proc, where she attacks somebody with Kiss of Death and they have low health, then we actually get quite a bump there with a little bit extra, and we're going to get right up around 10,000 total damage dealt. Malice's damage was a little bit more difficult to calculate because she has 3 different abilities. Each one of them could do different crit damage. So basically, let's pretend for a moment that she doesn't crit on anything. We talked about that already. She's going to do about 8,000 damage. If she was going to crit on Theft of Grace and nothing else, that's about a 25% chance for that to happen based on her base crit. So if she crits on this one, her damage is about close to 11,000. If she were to crit on Purging of Sins and only Purging of Sins, her damage is about 10,300. And if she were to crit on this one here, it's going to be the exact same as Theft of Grace, right around 11,000. It is possible for her to crit on 2 attacks. The percent chance goes down quite a bit. It is about a 6% chance for her to crit on 2 attacks. If she crits on her first 2 attacks, the total damage is about 13,000. If she crits on the first and third attack, the total damage is about almost 14,000. And if she crits on the second and third, it's about 10,300-ish. And then there's about a 1.5% chance that she crits on all 3 of her attacks. If that's the case, it's about 16,000. So even with Ella's bonus damage for crit and her increased crit rate, except for through long durations, long dungeons, for example, it's more likely that Malice is going to have a far higher damage output, and her attack stat is not that far off from Ella just to begin with. So it's actually pretty comparable there. And then just a couple of last things as far as Malice goes. This here, 20% damage for each buff on this hero. That's going to be huge. That's basically, you get a couple of buffs and you're almost at doubling your damage. Ella's definitely not getting this, and this is going to outpace that crit damage easily, because this will be sustained damage for everything. Her Wrath, her damage increases as health of target decreases. This is basically a built-in mechanic for that Kiss of Death, except for it's on all of her abilities. So we can't really put a price on that. She also lifesteals on crit. It's not quite as good as Ella, where she lifesteals on everything, but lifesteal on that. And then she gains energy back when she kills. And the last one was just an Ella crit bonus. But all things considered, when we start looking at the actual numbers here, it may not seem like it, but Malice definitely is the better hero here. If you look at their availability, Ella is in the honor summons, or the honor shop rather. She is much more available. Malice is available in the heroic portal. She's in there for a reason because she is technically a better hero. Now, back before we had some real serious meta heroes come out and Malice's first release, she was actually pretty dangerous for the people that had her 6 stars and fully ascended, because at that point there was no runes. You did not want to meet her in a dark alley. She was pretty brutal. But she's kind of fallen to the wayside for the most part. She doesn't have a ton of places right now, except for a couple of people using her with demon PvP teams, partially because of things like this here. The demons do have some PvP mechanics here where they get a little bit of dodginess. But as far as the numbers go, I don't see many instances where Ella's going to outpace Malice in terms of total abilities. The one thing I didn't really look at was that sustained damage over a very long dungeon, like a boss mode dungeon, because then we have to consider the fact that these abilities, we're going to have cooldowns on these. So this has 7 turns, 6 turns, and 6 turns, so pretty good cooldowns on these. So that's ultimately going to lead to Malice doing a bunch more basic attacks, which are going to crit a lot less. So if we were to average this out over, let's say, 30 turns, for example, maybe Ella keeps pace, but for the most part, if you're using this for PvP offense or defense, I would stick my support towards Malice if I had to. If it's a matter of determining which one you should get, one versus the other, if it's a times 10 guaranteed, I would go with Malice. Ella's always going to be there for you to get. As always, if we've overlooked anything, any major stats or traits that you think make one better than the other, if you're a real Ella fan, obviously Ella has her purposes with that charm, but as in terms of sustainability, she just doesn't quite do as well as Malice. I've always been an Ella fan. Back before the runes were out, I actually spent all of my honor on 6-starring Ella. She got me through a lot of the main campaign. But that was a long time ago. She's certainly not necessary anymore. But any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to let me know. And as always, thanks for watching. Thanks. Thank you so much for watching this video and supporting my channel. If you like this video, please show your continued support by hitting that like button, and be sure to check out both my YouTube channels for new content all the time. And always remember, peace is a lie, there's only passion. We'll see you next time.